Let me welcome everybody. I'm Barbara Walsh. I'm the Executive Director of the Rockbridge Area Conservation Council. We're so glad you could come out tonight to hear this very exciting talk on community-friendly lighting. Just a few rules of the road. If you have questions for the speaker, he'd be very happy to take them at the end of his presentation. So, either jot them down so you can ask them at the end, or write them into the chat in case you think you might forget or something, and I'll read them from the chat. And I think that's about it. It's a pretty basic setup here. I'm now going to introduce Cliff Kirikoff, who is the chairperson of our programs committee and who is responsible for organizing all of these wonderful presentations. He's having a little bit of trouble with his camera tonight, so he will be speaking from behind his nameplate and introducing our speaker tonight. Go ahead, Cliff.
Thanks, Barbara. And thank you, Bob Parks. We're honored to have you with us, and we're excited to hear your presentation, and also hope to work with you in the future. To introduce Bob, he's the Executive Director of the Smart Outdoor Lighting Alliance, a member of the Illuminating Engineering Society, Lighting Certified, and Community-Friendly Lighting Certified, and an ecological lighting designer. He's a chairman of the IES Outdoor Environmental Lighting Committee and former executive director of, get this, the International Dark Sky Association. While at IDA, he served as a lighting designer for a cooperative agreement with the National Park Service. This is way cool, I'll explain. It resulted in new ecologically responsible lighting being installed in 9 national parks, and later with the Florida Fish and Wildlife Survey, design and retrofit of 100 miles of the Gulf Coast to install turtle-safe lighting on public land. Just fabulous. Bob's presented at many lighting conferences in the United States, in Europe, in South America, in Australia, and he partners with LED Magazine to present webinars on community-friendly lighting. Finally, I'll wrap with this. Bob recently consulted pro bono with the Virginia Commonwealth Transportation Board to plan and execute a public demonstration and evaluation of proposed LED roadway fixtures for the upcoming conversion of all Virginia highway lighting. And we're talking about 75,000 to 150,000 fixtures to be installed over the next 10 years. So that's also way cool. It's a pleasure to introduce Bob. Take it away. Can you hear me?
Thank you, because I could not get to the mute button.
Okay.
After all that practice, Barbara, when I get into the presentation, I have no control over my mute. Okay. What's even better is it seems like I have less than any control over advancing the slides. All right, we're working on it. There we go. I don't know what's going on, but we're back. All right, thanks for the introduction.
Looks good at this end.
What's that?
Looks good at this end.
Okay, good. The ability to actually control it is really good too. So what I'm going to do tonight is just give you a brief overview of the community-friendly lighting program. It's part of the Smart Outdoor Lighting Alliance nonprofit that I started about 5 or 6 years ago. This program is designed to help communities and municipalities choose wisely as they make the transition to LED lighting. So the first thing we'll talk about is the most important, which is what is community-friendly lighting and how do we achieve it. So the best practices are where we'll start. For any good lighting design, you want to take, you want to use whatever standards and research are out there, the most recent and the best, to develop a design. And we can talk a little bit in detail what that means, but partially what it means is that we need to look at the new studies that have been done for vision research and how do we maximize visibility. Well, we've always, I think everybody's aware that we want to try to reduce glare, light trespass, and sky glow for whatever outdoor lighting we're developing. But the Smart Outdoor Lighting Alliance seized on one thing that seemed to have been missing in the conversation and was difficult to achieve back in the early days, and that's increasing visual comfort. So we'll talk at length about that as we get in. And near and dear to my heart, obviously, being an ecological lighting designer, is that we want to minimize the negative impact on the environment. But also a strength of the Smart Outdoor Lighting Alliance is we focus on pedestrian safety. It's one of the biggest problems today. It's not completely due to lighting, but it's something that if we do better lighting, we can reduce accidents and deaths. So one of the unique factors of the Smart Outdoor Lighting Alliance and the Community Friendly Lighting Program is that we found out early that the best designs are ones that employ public outreach and engagement. And we'll talk a little bit in depth about what that is. But up until now, typically designs were done by the Department of Transportation or the municipality with very little input or outreach. We try to use controls, adaptive controls, all the time. There is no excuse for not putting them in now. And let's talk about how we see, and this is an important aspect of the whole program. I'm going to move my window so I can actually see. Okay, so unlike what the standards focus on, we do not see with brightness. We see with contrast. So if you look at this scene right here, you can see a couple, well, if I back it back, you can see. So the left-hand side uses something called Luminance Contrast. We'll show you another slide, but you can see objects much farther away if they have bright colors. If you look on the right, that's a black and white image, and that would show you essentially what we used to see using high pressure sodium, very monochromatic, and colors did not read very well. So an important definition is luminance, and luminance is the light emanating from an object or light source. So the difference between light meters that you may be familiar with, which are incident light meters that you measure the amount of light falling on an object. Luminance is the light emanating from it. So if you use a special meter, a luminance meter, you can do the same kind of measurement, but it is not the same type of light. But luminance is an important aspect of contrast. This is a poorly designed LED lighting system in Brooklyn. And you can see right there how if you do it badly, you can really make a mess of things. That light is doing more good. Well, it's doing no good for the tree, but it's definitely illuminating the tree better than it is the road. But positive luminance contrast is what we try to achieve in all lighting design. You can see the soldier walking across the crosswalk there. The reason he stands out is the positive luminance contrast. I don't know if you can see the pointer, but
Yeah.
okay, so if he had no light on him, he would tend to blend into the background. And so there is light off camera here on either side, and that is being directed at him, giving you vertical illumination. and vertical illumination coupled with luminance contrast, which is the measurement of the brightness of the object that you want to be seen and the background. So in this case, you have a pretty dark background and just a little bit of light gives it visibility. And this is important for pedestrian lighting. You can also, in some instances, see visibility by negative luminance contrast. That's basically a silhouette of the pedestrian walking across the street. But obviously it gives you much less detail and is less useful for safety. This is a perfect example of the difference between chrominance contrast, or an example of chrominance contrast. Prior to LED, which is broad spectrum white light, you would never have really picked out the difference in color with this side, because monochromatic amber light would have basically rendered this a pale gray. Smokey's hat would have been picked out as well, but you can see the value of wearing bright colors when you're going to be walking or doing something in a city, because if you got dark clothes, the only thing somebody's going to see is a bright colored object on you. So now lighting levels there's a lot of confusion about this and how LED has changed that requirement. But we can say with confidence today that lighting in excess of the IES RP8-18, which is actually the document that documents the standard for roadway lighting, it only documents minimums. And in the past, that typically was a starting point for lighting designs, and they often went far in excess of the minimums. And it was designed around using high pressure sodium, which, like we said, was a monochromatic light, and the eye does not see as well using it. So to compensate, cities often overlit so that they could get more luminance contrast. But today with broad spectrum white light, it's a mistake. And anything in excess of that minimum will absolutely be problematic. So there's different levels based on the quantity of traffic on the road, but anytime a city or a municipality is installing new lighting, they should be starting at the minimum. And beyond that, you're going to be wasting energy. We're going to blow through some of these pretty quickly because I see I'm lingering as if I have an hour to talk, and I don't. Overlighting doesn't increase visibility. And that goes back to the first thing we said. Since you see by contrast, not luminance, overlighting a scene will not make it more visible. If you can provide contrast between the objects that need to be seen, like pedestrians, that will improve visibility. Overlighting doesn't reduce crime. It never has. The research is pretty clear on that. But overlighting high crime areas definitely stigmatizes that neighborhood for decades as being a crime area. And we just need to avoid that. So just to refresh, this is what glare looks like. This is a situation where the establishment is putting up lights primarily to illuminate the facade of the building. So they're not taking into account that stray light will now make it very difficult for people leaving their premises to walk to their car because they'll be blinded. I love this slide. This is from the early 1940s, and it's a painting, and it shows about the time where, we did rural electrification, everybody started having lights. And this is a roadway light that does a really good job of lighting up the side of that house, and not as good lighting the road as you go down. But this is an example of what you don't want to do, is you don't want to put the stray light into the bedroom windows of that building. So I'm sure everybody's seen pictures of this. I don't think it gets any worse than the San Fernando Valley. This would have been in the 80s or 90s. It was well before the conversion to LED, because that is high pressure sodium light. And what you're seeing is stray light bouncing up, and it doesn't have to be going up to get up. It scatters with particles in the air, moisture, and that scatter is what creates sky glow. So like I said, we focus a lot of our work on improving pedestrian safety. This is an example of an attempt by a city to try to make crosswalks better. And it does, but I got to be clear, it doesn't do a great job, because the light that they've added is just coming down on the subjects, the pedestrians walking across, which means they have good lighting on the top of their head. They'll have less than good lighting on their vertical surface. So what we want to do is light the vertical so that vehicles can see them, and see them at great distance. One good thing about this is those illuminated crosswalk icons with the pedestrians flash, so it does give some early warning to the drivers. This is an example of a installation I did in Alexandria for a condo community, and we did, with the limitations of not really having the ability to put up new poles, tried to improve their crosswalk lighting. There is behind me, as I take the picture, a light that will give vertical illumination to that crosswalk. And the wall pack also is doing a somewhat good job. But ideally, you would want something, an active crossing, where you'd have something where somebody either triggers it with a motion sensor or pushes a button, so that there is something that wakes up the driver and tells him to take a look. This is what we do a lot of, which is community-friendly lighting is comfortable both visually, and we do this with low light levels, warm color temperature, and avoiding overhead lighting when we can. So this is illuminating a path. The only thing that really needs to be illuminated is the path. So to put a high light just for that is wasting energy, and it's also going to create potentially glare and light trespass. This is not my installation, but this is at a university nearby. This is an older slide. This is probably 8 or 9 years old at this point, but it was one of the first installations that I photographed that used 100% what we would consider community-friendly lighting. Full cutoff, yes, but also the color temperatures were warm. And you can see, once again, using things like bollards to light pathways. This is a installation in London done by a friend of mine, showing that even in commercial installations, with effort, you can do a quality lighting design that doesn't create a lot of sky glow and light wasted energy. So visual comfort we talked about. Let's talk about it in more details. You can get there by several paths. The easiest one is just choosing the right fixture. And fixtures are rated with something called backlight uplight glare. And that is an IES rating. And it has the B, the U, and the G has a value from 0 to 5. 0 being the best and 5 being the worst. So what we would try to do is urge cities to use the B. The B is actually somewhat, I don't know how to say it. It's application dependent. So you don't actually, you can't specify the backlight. In some cases, you want little or no backlight. Some cases, you might need more. But in all cases, uplight and glare should be minimized. So our standards, the community-friendly lighting standards, only author or only certifies fixtures that are U0 or G0 or 1. So that's how you eliminate glare at the beginning, and reducing that will improve visual comfort. And what unfortunately has been done in the past is to chase standards that basically are specifying illuminance or luminance and uniformity. And that's basically a ratio from light to dark. And in most situations, it is far less important than reducing glare. And light trespass, as you can see, this is not an old installation. This is a new installation in Brooklyn after they completely converted the borough to LED. And you can see, if you don't care about any of the things we're talking about, this is the kind of lighting you'll end up with. Color temperature 4000 K. The fixtures were U2 and G4. And you can see that the fixture here is doing a really good job of lighting the entire facade across the street. So the last part, or the most difficult part to make the conversion to quality outdoor lighting and visual comfort, is to get away from using LEDs that have no diffusion, that they're point source glare. You might have 50 or more point source glare that is brighter than the sun. And you're putting them up at night in a darkened environment. And that's why if you look up, you have flash bulb burn for a while, because it is extreme contrast. So that's what makes it difficult for the eye. The eye can't adjust quickly, so it ends up making it dangerous for pedestrians, because if they look up, they will be temporarily disabled. So the good news is, and we'll show a few of them, there's tons of good fixtures now available. That wasn't the case just 5 or 6 years ago. One of the things I love is something called total internal reflection optics, which I'll show you a picture of, but it has no point source glare. When we talk about uniformity, I just show you this slide. This was state-of-the-art parking lot uniformity with high pressure sodium lighting. So 10 or 15, 20 years ago, this is how you would design a parking lot. You can just see the ratio from dark to light is very high. And that's the nature of the fixture that's producing it and the lamp. Old high intensity discharge lamps put a huge amount of their lumens underneath of them on the pavement. Very difficult to spread it out as well as we can with LED. So today, this is what you can do, and I show this at conferences, and I have lighting engineers, getting all excited. This is the opposite of bad uniformity. This is too much uniformity, and people are, don't believe you can have too much uniformity. Well, with this amount of uniformity, if I throw a gray box in the middle of that road, it'll be lit evenly from behind, forward, left, right, top. And what that will mean is the detection distance, the distance from when you're driving your car, how long do you have before you know you have to put on the brakes, is based on the detection distance. So the higher that number, the better. In some cases, that detection distance may be reduced by 20 or 30% because there's too much uniformity. So it's kind of counterintuitive in some ways, but less uniformity, meaning you would see dark areas more than what you're seeing here. They would be regular. In fact, if you look in the back where there's high pressure sodium, you can see how intense the shadows were across the road. We don't want that, but we want a little less uniformity so that you can actually see better. So this is a fixture using total internal reflection optics. And what it is essentially a fiber optic design. So on the edge of this fixture, recessed behind the metal, the LEDs are bonded to a flat lens. This flat lens then refracts the light because of micro-refractive grooves in it. And then that directs the light very accurately to the surface that you want. But when you look at this, you're not going to see glare because the luminance is spread out over a very large area. And that's the key to improving visual comfort. This is another fixture. This was a fixture that I installed at that condo project, and this was one of the first ones available. It's a beautiful fixture, without the light on, and that shows you, in this case, with that exposure, you can actually see where the LEDs are bonded. In this fixture, that you don't have them uniformly, but you can see the hot spots. Once you're in a darkened environment, it just looks like a glow. This is the only way that you can do visual comfort in fixtures that aren't using something like a total internal reflection lens. And that's basically just covering over point source LEDs with a refractive material, a diffusion material that directs the light, but it also reduces the pinpoint glare. This is a great example of a very unusual fixture that chose to put all the LEDs in this wand in the middle, and they're facing up. And they are reflecting off of a mirror reflector, the whole back of this, and then they bounce through diffused glass. It gives a beautiful soft glow. It's not all that efficient, unfortunately, because of all the reflection and the diffusion. Diffusion is not as efficient as using a total internal reflection. There's loss when you scatter it through that media. So let's talk about the hot topics. Right now, for the last 5 years, since the AMA came out with their report talking about color temperature, a lot of people have been worried about the high color temperature that was the standard for LED lighting since the beginning. When we started with LED lighting 12 or 13 years ago, when it became commercially viable, the only thing that was commercially viable was a very high CCT, maybe 6,000 K CCT, because white light LED is derived from blue LEDs. So it's coated with a phosphor, and it transfers that light energy into the visual spectrum, visible spectrum. And before that, without using 6,000 K, it was not as efficient as a high pressure sodium fixture, which is on the right here. So if you see, this is a good example of two things. I want to talk about the color of light is relative. The brain interprets light after it's been exposed a while. If you're in a neighborhood with just this high blue, rich white light, you're not going to see blue after a while. You're going to see glare, and you're going to see it as really feels too bright, and that's based on the physiology of your eye. But the color changes, the brain reinterprets it. So that's why high pressure sodium wasn't really as bad as you can see it here. This is a unique example of being able to see both in the same frame. The camera is recording it accurately. Your brain would, after being under that high pressure sodium for half an hour, 20 minutes, it would start seeming whiter. It would never be white. I mean, there's not enough blue and red and whatever else you need, but it would not seem dark yellow. So I'll just blow through these slides because I know we're running too long on these. But the most important part of the community-friendly lighting program is that the color of street lighting is a community preference, and it needs to be assessed. So we need to do outreach. We need to find out what the community wants. And warmer color temperature can help preserve neighborhood character and ambiance. And I'll just interject that I've been doing projects in rural Virginia for several years now. And when we do this outreach, we find that the residents and, in most cases, municipalities have really decided to go towards the warm end of the spectrum. So say if you did a lighting installation in Fairfax County, if you put in 2700K, which is kind of the new best compromise between efficiency and visual comfort, some people would object because it would be in an environment where they've been used to higher color temperature. But if you go out to, for instance, Hillsborough, which is where we did a new installation of municipal lighting, we started out looking at 3000K, and we ended up with 2700K, and some people were thinking that was too white. And we've done some other installations in smaller areas like Stanton, and for a church that we did lighting there for, we ended up with about 1600K. And so it's very amber, but with LED, the visibility under very warm color is so much better than what you're going to see under high pressure sodium. It has to be experienced, but you will not feel like you can't see well under it. So it gets down to picking the color that's right for the neighborhood and basically trying to preserve the character and ambiance, especially in historic communities. They've been used to warm color temperature for, dozens of years. So, picking something that matches that is actually becomes their community standard. But I will say that high CCT increases the perception of glare and light trespass. So it doesn't actually increase glare or light trespass, but the perception to the eye is that the higher the color temperature, the brighter it is, and then therefore more disruptive. If you feel that it had too much glare before with, say, high pressure sodium, the change to a high CCT, 4000K or so, is going to be very noticeable. Now it also increases, and this isn't the perception of, it increases sky glow. So as you increase the CCT, it increases the amount of scatter in the atmosphere. So it dramatically increases sky glow just by using higher CCT. And it dramatically increases ecological disruption. We can talk later, but with ecological lighting, we want to stay as close to a amber, a true amber, something with a very narrow band. So as you deviate from that, in most cases, you are going to disrupt the ecological balance. And this is something we worked for over 2 years. I was a volunteer on the VDOT committee to rethink outdoor lighting, roadway lighting for Virginia. And one of the things we finally have achieved is that the research shows that 4000K may only be of value on high-speed roads. So once again, it's detection distance. If you can get 10% more detection distance with 4000K, on high-speed roads, you're already going too fast to stop. You can't stop at 55 miles per hour based on what you can see in your headlights. And that's a big problem with high-speed travel, is that without any roadway lighting, you need to be prepared to stop, and you may not be able to stop between the time you see an object in the road and the time you're going to hit it. And also for high conflict zones, pedestrian to vehicle conflict zones, the added blue and red content of 4000K may actually improve visibility for those pedestrians in crosswalks. Energy savings, you can get the same energy, 4000K and say 2700K. The difference in efficacy is probably less than 7%. now. It used to be 30%. So there really is no excuse. Just so you know, this is a spectrogram of different light sources. So we're trying to, explain in a presentation, I would show you these lights in different forms so you can understand. But this is easy. This is flame. This would be what you would see sitting around a campfire. And you can see that there's very little blue. And once you start up the spectra, so in green and yellow, but really in red, and as you get over here, this is actually infrared. So this is a spectra that we have become accustomed to over millennia. And this is an example of what we had before we started talking about being concerned about color temperature. So HPS, high pressure sodium, has been around for 30 years or more. It replaced mercury vapor, and it was an improvement in lots of ways over mercury vapor. But as you can see, it's made up of different spikes. It's not continuous color. Different things, once heated, give different color lights. So you got some blue, you got a little bit of cyan down here, and then you go into green and amber, which is where the most of the spectra is, and then you got some red. The first widespread installations of roadway lighting, as we said, were 4,000 K. So this is the LED spectra for 4,000 K, and it has a huge spike in the blue. This is unfortunately also overlaps the circadian receptors in your eye, which are designed to figure out whether it's day or night. So if you're pumping out a lot of blue light at night, you are basically going to potentially disrupt your circadian cycles. And then the rest of the spectra actually tracks pretty well over the high pressure sodium. But you add the two together, they look very white, very blue white. So this is, I would say, our starting point for most installations at this point. We would not spec anything higher than 2700 K unless there was a need. And we talked about those rare examples where you need it. Potentially a crosswalk, you might use a brighter 3000 K or such. But this is the difference. There's your spectra in blue. And as you remember, it looked like that before. And that's what it looks like with 2700 K. And this is done by using phosphors efficiently and pushing that blue light over into the more usable visual spectrum. So you get a lot more green, you get a lot more red. So for design considerations, the big ones are, we basically want to use a good distribution, an IES distribution. That's where the light goes, and I'll show you a slide. By using that, you're not going to waste energy, and you get it where the task is. And we want to shield everything to control light trespass. In some cases, that requires additional shielding, but we would always use fully shielded fixtures. And once again, using the lowest U and G of the bug rating. And we can dim now. LED has the potential to dim easily. And there's no reason at this point that every installation would not be dimming. And you can reduce energy by 50% by just dimming to the required levels in the RP8 after traffic has been reduced to the point where the vehicle to pedestrian conflict is reduced by 50%. So this is the bug rating, and we're running out of time, so I'm going to blow through this, but this is uplight, 2 hemispheres. Then you've got backlight, and it ranges from very high to low, and you've got forward light. So when we talk about uplight, the U, that's there. The G is actually the FVH and the FH. Excuse me. This is an IES distribution. Just if you want to remember this, type 1 is for 1-lane road, type 2 for 2, 3, 4, And type 5 is either a circle or a square. So obviously, if you pick the right light for the design, you're going to put the light where it's needed and not where it's not needed. If you put a type 4 in a residential neighborhood that had very little setback from the house, like what we saw in that Brooklyn slide, you don't want to use a type 4 because that's going to light the front porch of the house across the street. So this is a great slide. Won't go into a lot of detail, but it shows what your zones are. This is your useful light, the bright yellow. Once you start moving up into this, you've got glare for the pedestrian. But as you keep going up, you have glare for residential houses. But then we're going to call that light trespass because it's now going into the windows of that house. So, and you also have sky glow, and that is based on 2 factors, not just uplight. Direct uplight from the fixture, that's easy. We can control that. But if you have too much light bouncing off a concrete surface, you're going to get uplight. And it's a percentage of the reflectivity of that surface. You will get uplight. So why is public lighting so hard? Well, the quality, there's just way too much focus on low cost. So I've gone through a lot of these installations, designed really great lighting, only to have the fixture swapped at the end to save, $1. And they always err on the side of too much versus high quality. So, when in doubt, light it up. And they do this for, it's kind of like Pavlov's dog. They've been trained over the years that the higher the illumination levels, they feel that it will give a feeling of safety and hopefully avoid litigation. There's no research to say that's accurate, but it's certainly why it's being done. And this is the sad part, and this is what part of our mission statement with the Smart Outdoor Lighting Alliance is we need to help train the folks that are actually making those decisions, and hopefully they'll do better. And our current standards just focus on lighting levels and uniformity, so there's nothing in there about quality. Public outreach is what I love to do. This is a shot of a walking tour of a new installation that takes people out, gives them a survey, and asks them to participate and answer some very non-leading questions, balanced questions. Don't tell them what you want them to say yes to. If you give them fair and balanced questions, the data you get back can help guide your decisions on the installation. And municipalities just typically do not have the lighting expertise to do these projects without some outside help. And in every installation that I'm involved in, we pilot test every fixture. We pilot the color temperatures, the lighting levels, the controls, the different types of optics, everything that we're considering. And if you do that, you can get good feedback to guide your decisions. We talked about this, talked about neutral questions. We need to engage broad demographic sampling. You don't want to just have a public meeting and just get the squeaky wheels. Those are the people that come out all the time, and they'll have an opinion, but you want to balance it with everybody else. We can't go into detail how you would do that, but you can bring in a broad section, cross section. Part of it is, using all kinds of media to get to all different ages and population diversity. And we hold town hall public meetings from the get-go. We do them early, and you do them frequently, so that as you go, you explain what's being looked at, and then you show them whatever you can as soon as you can. And you better use that data for the final decision, because if people are spending their time and giving you their time to get feedback, you want to use it. So lighting controls, they're just so easy to use now. 10 years ago, it was the Wild West. Very difficult to implement because none of them spoke to each other. Reliability wasn't great. And at this point in time, the cost has gone down, the reliability's gone up, and there is no reason at all to not use them. And by using them, you have the ability to reduce your energy by 40% more just by using the RP8 standard. And the payback period will be less than or equal to that of the fixture. So the only thing you have to do is budget so that you can put it in, and it will pay for itself before your fixtures will. And adding them later, nobody will ever do it, primarily because the cost of labor is a huge chunk of that. If you put them up with the fixture, it costs you no more. So wrapping up, the community lighting certification, community friendly lighting certification is a new testing program. It's a training and testing program we implemented about 4 years ago. We go to pretty much anywhere anybody asks us to give training. And the training it's the first outdoor lighting specific certification in the country, in the world. And it's one that's really needed because, for instance, I'm lighting certified in LC. I got that, but it may have had 4 questions on it that related to outdoor lighting, period. It doesn't do enough. A lot of people that have LCs are specifying lighting. Excuse me, they're specifying lighting for the outdoor, but they really don't understand the differences between indoor and outdoor. So this certification recognizes advanced knowledge in community-friendly lighting design principles. It's designed to help, as we said before, municipal, utility, planners, manufacturers, contractors, anybody that needs to know how to properly implement outdoor lighting. And we give it in live. Just got finished with a session, our first in-person training session in 2 years at Light Fair in New York, happened 2 weeks ago. Had a class of 50, and boy, did it feel good. Web-based training is great, and we're really ramping that up. In fact, we are partnering with another group called the Lighting Agora to try to put everything we have on the website, plus a lot of new stuff, to make it a training center so anybody can come in and virtually learn everything they need without ever having to meet me in person. Sniff, sniff. So it's 120 questions. It's been a written test. We're actually looking now at how we can do that virtually. There's a continuing education requirement, as in most certifications. Every year you're required to take training related to outdoor lighting and controls. And it renews every 3 years. So let's see. Wow, I left 10 minutes. Okay, I'm open for questions.
Well, that was terrific, Bob. Absolutely fascinating. And to attendees, if you have any questions, type them into the chat. I think that'll be the most orderly way for me to be able to read them off. We have so many people here that I can't see you all on one screen, so raising hands is not going to do very well for us. Okay, first question, Bob.
Yep.
Bug rating.
Yep.
Do most outdoor commercial fixtures have this rating? Like, how would you know what the bug rating is?
Okay, good question. Really good question. Absolutely, it's required for certification. When you create a fixture, you have to have an IES file. The IES file is what is done at a lab that tests the fixture. And while the manufacturer may not have the bug rating in its literature, the bug rating is in every IES file. So unfortunately, if they don't choose to publicize it, you may have to ask to find out what it is, but you can open up an IES file is actually a text file. You can open it up, and if you know where to look, you can see where it is. But yes, it has every fixture other than really on the low end, things that might be, you're buying them on Amazon. Anything that you'd be using for public lighting would have a bug rating.
So if I'm at the store and I'm buying something for my property, am I going to see a bug rating on the packaging? You're telling me I do some
unlikely.
research?
Unlikely.
Okay.
What you're going to be looking for is fully shielded fixtures. So, I mean, you want a fixture that's not going to allow any glare or uplight. And that's easy. I mean, we can go back and show you what that would be. But no, actually, you can look at my graphic here. A fully shielded fixture, no light above the horizon. So no light would go up. So it might go out that far, but that would be the definition of a fully shielded light. So if you see a drop lens or you see exposed glass, that's probably not a full cutoff fixture.
Okay. Next question. Can you describe what CCT means?
Sure. Correlated color temperature is a metric that was devised years ago, and it basically was devised to categorize the color of light for interior lighting. And it was paired with another thing that basically was a color rendering index. So based on what color you were using and how it rendered that light, you could get a guesstimation of what the color would look like. CCT is an incredibly poor metric for LED. It was devised with continuous spectra light. We no longer have that. As you saw in the diagram, you have spikes of different spectra that make up. So you can actually play around with those spikes to get the same CCT, yet still have a lot of blue. So if somebody wants to manipulate the spectra, they can get whatever they want and call it whatever they want. And for that reason, it's just a bad metric. The best metric is now called spectral power distribution. It's very difficult to find anybody publishing that. But what it does, if you bring it into a program, you can get the spectra out of it. So you can see exactly where the energy is coming out. And our community-friendly lighting certification for fixtures only uses spectral power distribution. We require anybody submitting the fixture to give us that data so that we can evaluate it.
Okay. Could you repeat or name some of the places or communities in Virginia where we might see examples of good lighting?
Okay, if my memory serves me right. If you get a chance, go to Stanton and look at the church that is located on, I'm going to blank on the name. It was an Episcopal church. I don't remember what street it's on. We did a really interesting test there where they have about, I think it was 20 lights, 20 fixtures. Most of them are post tops, very old decorative fixtures that unfortunately had, exposed lamp. So we did two things. We moved the socket from the bottom and we put it up in the top, and we tried different lamps. And then we decided that we could actually use total internal reflection as a retrofit. So we took that, what you saw in that expensive area lighting, which I can go back if we want to and look at it. But that fixture that we retrofitted for Stanton has a 10-inch disc. It's a total internal reflection lamp or a fixture that is designed for cove lighting. So it's designed to put in your soffit at home. It's a incredibly low profile. It's only about a half an inch thick. And we mounted that with some adapters in the top of the fixture. I wish I had pictures because it would cut down the words. But we basically built an adapter, put it up in the top, and we changed the color temperature. The lowest color temperature we could get on the shelf was 2700. And we had to tint we didn't tint the lens that you see, we tinted the LEDs. So the LEDs around the outside, we had to put in, it's an industrial gel, It's better than what you would use in theater or something, and it's designed to last a long time. And it basically corrects color temperature. So we picked one that takes 2700 down to 1600. And so they ended up, we tried different ones, and the people looked at it, and we showed them 3 or 4 different examples. We started at 2200, and they just went for the lowest, and that was 1600. And that is an example of community standards for a specific environment. This is a churchyard, and it's a historic church. So they had gone from a high pressure sodium to a metal halide, and everybody was very unhappy, especially the neighbors across the street, because the metal halide lamp was visible. It was right, and it has nice glass panes, and you could see it really well as it produced light trespass for the neighbors. So other places, Stanton, Hillsborough, Virginia, is where we did the municipal installation. Those were 36 post-op lights. Those are what we did using the new standards for VDOT that we worked on for 2 years. That was the first installation of to my knowledge, using 2700 and using it on it's not a major road, but it's a collector. So it's got a lot of traffic. It only has a lot of traffic for a short period of time, but we dim it at 10 o'clock. So it goes from a level that meets the standards for that traffic. And then at 10 o'clock, it goes down 50%. So at night, it looks great. So if you want to walk around and what a community can look like, it is 2700K, which is higher than I would have liked, but it also had to meet the standards, and anything less than 2700K requires specific authorization from VDOT. So that takes a little bit of time that we didn't have. What else? The town of Washington, we are retrofitting all of the streetlights, and they're doing it in a very slow fashion. It's a budgetary issue, but I think we're up to about half of their streetlights. And again, we're using 1600K, and that was separately, that's what they wanted to use, and it looks great. And we're actually retrofitting another historic fixture. It's a crook fixture. I'd have to show you to explain it, but it's a bell housing. It starts with a thing and goes out like this. And they really loved the fixture. They didn't want to replace it, so we actually just came up with a lamp to replace the high pressure sodium.
We have a bunch of other questions, Bob. And I'm just wondering where
I can go long if you want to go long.
You anticipated my question, which is we did start a minute or two late. We have a number of other questions, and we have a request to make a comment from an astronomical perspective. If you're willing to go another 5 or 10 minutes,
absolutely.
That would be fabulous. And for those of you who cannot stay any longer, feel free to sign off when you need to. And you can
thank you for attending.
Yes, and thank you very much. Also, you will find the tail end of this online on the RACC website. We'll post the recording there. Okay, so 5 or 10 minutes more. And next question. What are adaptive controls? I think you might have been touching on that in one of your examples. And exactly what do they do?
Very simple. Adaptive controls, you have them in your house probably. That would be a dimmer. So if you can dim your lights, you have an adaptive control. They're a little more sophisticated in municipal lighting. Sometimes they are what we would call local, which are programmed to do something. Maybe they dim at a certain period of time. A very simple retrofit is replacing the photo cell on the top of fixtures with a controller that senses the time of day, and you can program it to dim at a certain time. And that's called a part night dimmer. So you could basically put one in and say, at 10 o'clock, we want it to go down 50%, or in some cases at 10 o'clock, we want it to go off. So that would be a way of controlling light at night when it's not needed. So if you don't have any traffic, you don't have any pedestrians, you can control it with a very simple, that's about $50 addition to a fixture to add that. But you can also have the controls built in. Adaptive controls can be fairly cost effective if you get them with the fixture. So they are able to dim from 100% to typically 0. And you have some sort of controller, whether it be built into the fixture or it be external to the fixture, that tells it when to do that. So in that installation, in that condo community, every fixture in that installation, 120, I think, has, not only does it have a adaptive control, and it's called a RF mesh adaptive control, which I can go into detail, but it might be getting too much into the weeds. But it tells, I can take an iPad, and I can tell one fixture what I want it to do, and I can give it up at this time, down at that time, and I can do as many things as I want. And when I say go, it will talk to each fixture in the installation. So it will go out and make that change throughout the fixture, throughout the installation. But there is no central management system that tells them to go up and down. When you get into big city lighting, they'll have something called the central management system, and all the fixtures are linked either by a cell tower signal or a hard wire. And they basically can look at a control panel and know what lights are doing and turn them on and off, and that's the top end. But those are all adaptive controls. At its basic nature, a switch is an adaptive control. You turn it off or on. So anything that controls.
I'm sorry. It sounds like it would save energy and maybe some energy cost as well.
It saves energy, but it also reduces everything that we don't want. Light trespass, light, sky glow, all those things. If you don't need a light, I mean, when we do ecological lighting design, the very first question when you walk into the situation is, yeah, there's a light there. Why? Did that light need to be there? Did that need disappear? So that maybe 10 years ago, there was some activity and they put that light up, but we found in these national parks, nobody takes the lights down after they're not needed. So you basically look in, your first item is how many of these are necessary, and then how can we do them better?
Okay, next question. If you mix 500,000K LEDs with 2,700K LEDs, can you achieve friendly lighting?
Yeah, I mean, here's the deal. The light sources are additive. So whatever you put in, some fixtures by design come with different CCTs. I'm familiar with horticultural lighting. Plants need different spectra, and they need spikes in different areas. So most horticultural lights have very deep red LEDs, and they have very deep blue. And at different times of the cycle of a plant, it either needs more blue or more red to grow efficiently. You can do the same thing. We used to have a lot of experimentation in something called bimodal street lighting, where you would start potentially during rush hour with a higher color temperature. Back in the day, it was mainly 4,000K, and you would have one bank of 4,000K, and you'd have one bank of a lower CCT. And we often tried to put in something similar to there's something called phosphor converted amber, which is a very efficient LED that looks like high pressure sodium. So if you put a bank of that in and a bank of 4,000K, you just set up an adaptive timer to cross over between, say, 8 o'clock. And so during rush hour, you were a really white color. By the time you got to a period where there was no traffic to speak of, you could be back down to high pressure sodium. And that was the best of both worlds. The problem is it complicates the fixture. It increases the cost. You have to have two times everything, drivers and LEDs and all that. And we found very few takers. A couple of the manufacturers that were offering them based on when I was at IDA, we were encouraging them to create these specifically for things like the national parks. Unfortunately, they really never took off, and I haven't seen much of any of that available. You could probably have them custom made, but not really there anymore. But as far as your question, yeah, I mean, you can put any fixture together with anything you want. The problem is, once again, you need to reduce the glare, and you do not want those LEDs to be directly lensed so you can see them, because if you look up, the blue LEDs, the 4000K, are going to create more glare.
Next question, moving along here, trying to get them as many in as we can. Where and when will VDOT begin switching to new friendly LEDs?
Well, that was a big part of our negotiations, and the negotiations were primarily with Virginia Dominion. So they are the people that stock all the fixtures that are being used in most of VDOT road installations. And that was a big hurdle because they have typically not had very good choices. They didn't offer fixtures that we would call visually comfortable. The good news is there's two now on the schedule. So there's what they call their Cobra, is a very good Cree LED with total internal reflection fins. And they also have another parking lot fixture, which I'm not sure the manufacturer of, but it is a decorative. And the decorative has recessed LEDs in the top. So it doesn't have diffusion, but it's available in 2700K and up. So for historic areas, that's a potential option if you have to do a VDOT. But they're available. They're not being sold. I mean, they're not sold with quotes. You have to ask for them. You have to find a list, and you have to tell them this is what I want, because it's not what they're going to offer. They're a lot like if you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail. They have a plan, and they want to do it exactly the way they've done it for the last 20 years. So to get them to change is going to require communities saying, I hear that you can do this, and please put these in. And the community can do it. I mean, you can basically say, this is our community preference. We want this. You might get some headaches, but if you do, let me know, because I want to know specifically if Virginia Dominion is doing what they said they were going to do.
Okay. Let me see here. We've got a couple of more. Let's do one more question, and then let's check in with the person who has a comment to make. Is there a difference between dark sky lighting and community-friendly lighting?
Yes.
Or are they the same thing?
Yes. Unfortunately, like you said earlier, I was the executive director for 5 years at International Dark Sky Association in ancient history now. But at the time, we were on the cutting edge, and we kept on reducing the allowed CCT. When I left, I think we were down to 3000K, and I think they've gone down since then. But unfortunately, their fixture seal of approval really hasn't embraced the thing that we are focused on, which is visual comfort. So we want to reduce glare and light trespass. Their fixture requirements reduce light trespass because they require fully shielded fixtures. But unfortunately, glare isn't part of that. They just haven't embraced that, and I'm not quite sure, but I'm sure at some point they will. So yes, ours is better.
Okay. We have a person who'd like to make a comment from an astronomy point of view. Kurt,
Okay.
are you still on the line? And
Yes, I am.
Oh, okay. Hi.
Hello.
Would you
Hey,
like to
Kurt.
make your comment now, and then we'll wrap up?
Yes, indeed. Bob, wonderful presentation from the standpoint of a lighting practitioner.
Thank you.
I have an astronomical background. In fact, I worked with David Crawford at the Kitt Peak National Observatory back in the
Awesome.
days when he
Awesome.
founded the International Dark Sky Association.
Well, I'll
And I
come
had
clean
one
before you say this.
Yeah.
I have 10 acres and an observatory in West Virginia. So I started my journey into lighting because Bob Gent recruited me when he was in DC as an advocate for dark sky lighting. And I go way back with Dave Crawford came and spoke to the Northern Virginia Astronomy Club, which I'm a member of back in the early days. But Bob Gent did the arm twisting, and that's why I formed the Virginia Outdoor Lighting Task Force. The original group was named Volt, and we've evolved to SOLA, but the mission's the same. It's just a much bigger platform now. Sorry, go ahead. But I'm one of the gang, so I'll tell you what I think from an astronomer's point of view.
Well, thanks for your stressing a couple of things. Color temperature, of course, is something of great concern to astronomers because most of the interesting parts of the spectrum are in the blue, and scattering of light is worst at the blue end of the spectrum. So moving toward lower color temperatures is a step in the right direction. The other concept that you mentioned, the concept of light trespass, is something that I wish the general public could grasp. Not only in the case of public lighting, which I gather you've largely concentrated on, but in private lighting, all too often we see private landowners making light installations that bother their neighbors and put a lot of light up into the sky. And then the last thing that I wanted to say is that astronomers are troubled not only by the light that comes up from the ground, but nowadays we have a whole set of new problems from satellite launches.
Just when we thought we had enough problems, right?
Elon Musk is putting over 10,000 satellites up there, all of which are light sources.
Write your legislator now and early.
Yeah.
Because that's going to be a fight, but I don't see. I've fought it for 20 years now. We formed the Virginia Outdoor Lighting Task Force in, oh my goodness, 2008, I guess. No, I'm going to say 2000. My God, I'm old. Anyway, yeah, 2000 was when we actually formed the Virginia Outdoor Lighting Task Force, and that was for helping communities do lighting ordinances. That's what we did, and we did it for a long time. I guess our biggest claim to fame is we consulted with Fairfax County and Loudoun County, which were the biggest and worst offenders from a lighting standpoint to get lighting ordinances. And they're still really important. And we talked earlier with Barbara and Clifford about, how they're really important in the rural areas of Virginia, because a lot of them have not been updated. And when you have an ordinance, somebody is going to have to be concerned about it. I stress that lighting ordinances do not have to exempt VDOT. Okay, so VDOT has to do within the city limits what the community standards say. It's part of what we worked on with VDOT for 2 years. So when you do an ordinance now, make it much farther reaching. So there are exemptions in VDOT to get lower color temperature. You can go below 2700, and I did that specifically because some of my customers, like the town of Washington, are doing 1600. And 1600 in local roads with speed limits less than 25 miles per hour do not have to have white light. They don't have to have any light. And I want to repeat that. Communities with local classification roads that have low vehicle to pedestrian conflict don't need any lighting. None, period. Not required by IES in the IES standards, not required by VDOT. So it's a question of using the right light in the right area. So, I mean, large cities don't need it. Certainly small cities and small towns shouldn't be, letting VDOT overlight their communities. So, it's a knowledge business. And unfortunately, that knowledge seems to be going one direction.
Thank you.
You can't get VDOT to tell you, oh yeah, you can put 1600 in. It's in the law. They won't do it. So from your question, what I will say is that yes, blue rich white light is the scourge, but I'll tell you the good news is it's changing. I've been around so long that I can remember when we had to fight to get 4,000K. Okay, and now we're saying 3,000K is too high. And people are agreeing. So that's in less than a decade changing everything. But it's because the economics of LED have changed. If you can make a fixture that's efficient at 3,000K, there is no reason to try to sell them at 4,000K. So that's good news. I can't help you on Starlink. That's a disaster I never saw coming. And I don't know how they've tried to do things, but to be quite honest, there's nobody in Congress that seems to care, and they're certainly not going to do it, for goodwill. So,
well, thanks so much. I have posted a link to my own presentation from an astronomical perspective in the chat room.
Sure.
Great. Kurt, I will send that out to all the attendees. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Cliff, do you want to wrap us up and say something about our next presentation?
Well, sure. I want to thank Bob for a fantastic and inspiring presentation. And I really look forward to Bob visiting us here in Lexington and maybe giving us some tips and advice as we
well, I see how close you are to Stanton. I to be honest, I looked on the map to find Lexington, and it wasn't that far from Stanton.
You live in Stanton?
Well, we did the work in Stanton. Yeah, that was the church.
Oh, the church there. Yeah, okay.
We also did what we call a walkabout, which was really fun. We did a night tour and walked around and showed them good and bad lighting. So you get up close and personal, and you can experience glare and light trespass, which we all need to do every once in a while.
Oh, maybe we could have a walkabout here in Lexington. That would help us a lot.
Yeah.
Our next program is December 8th at the same time. 7 to 8 p.m. And it's going to feature John Goss, who's going to give us a fascinating talk on astronomy, and ties right into the dark skies and lighting issues we were talking about here tonight that Bob presented. So it's a great follow on, and it can reinforce our activism here in the area toward protecting dark sky and helping community lighting here in Lexington. So John, I know you're online here with us tonight, and we really look forward to hearing from you December.
You're in very good hands, and I'll pass the proverbial torch.
Okay. Thank you.
Well, thank you everybody so very much for coming tonight. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Good night.
Thanks to all.